Well, this has been quite the summer, right, gamers? From the jubilation we felt from Summer Game Fest kicking off this summer, it has just been whiplash after whiplash of getting the most bleak gaming news across the industry. Just this week, Xbox announced thousands of layoffs happening across their studios, with multiple studios being spun off into independent entities. And this is only a week after one of the worst things that I think I've seen happen in the gaming industry, which is, of course, the topic of today's video: PlayStation stopping physical disc production by 2028. Following one of the worst ratios of all time that I've ever seen on Twitter, this has caused an explosion of discourse across the internet, so much so that we got Gene Park talking about it on CNN. Because this issue is so much more than what it is. The cataclysmic consequences from this decision affects all of us. And yes, even though people freak out at this word, I would say that this is even a political issue. And out of all this discourse, I'm actually pretty shocked at how people don't realize this, that this decision affects all gamers, everyone who enjoys video games. I've seen a number of people say, I'm a PC gamer, I download all my games digitally, I haven't bought physical in years, and they don't really realize the ramifications. So with this video, I hope that I can shed some light on how deep the consequences of this decision really goes. If you're new here, hi, my name is Anna. I talk about all things happening in gaming, whether that's stuff happening in the industry or just games I enjoy and everything in between. On July 1st, Sony posted this blog that titles "Physical Disc Production Ending in January 2028 for New Games Releasing on PlayStation Consoles." In response to shifting trends in consumer preference, new games will be released on PlayStation Store and at retailers in digital formats only. As consumer preferences and the broader entertainment industry continue to shift away from physical discs to digital, physical game disc production for all new games releasing on PlayStation consoles will be discontinued starting January 2028. Following this date, new games will be available on PlayStation Store and at retailers in digital formats only. This is a natural direction for Sony Interactive Entertainment to adapt to consumer trends, as the general preference for digital media significantly outpaces physical discs. This transition will enable us to align more closely with how most of our community prefers to access and play games today. Along with that announcement, they posted a separate announcement in this blog that titles "An Update on PlayStation Store for PS3 and PS Vita." After nearly 2 decades of supporting the PS3 console generation, we wanted to let you know that we will be closing the PlayStation Store on PS3 as well as on PS Vita. PlayStation Store on PS3 will close in select markets starting this year, followed by global closures for PS3 and PS Vita next year. That means new content purchases will no longer be possible once the PlayStation Store closes on these devices. As reported by VGC, Sony's largest production site is already preparing its staff to move away from manufacturing discs and start making other products instead. Sony has reportedly been anticipating this shift for some time, and as such, around 30 million euros has recently been invested on new equipment designed to make optical micro lenses instead, leading to a pivot for the plant. Employees at the plant were reassigned from disc production on Wednesday to start testing the new equipment, with Sony planning to retrain them extensively in the future and begin mass production of optical micro lenses next year. So now let's get into the meat and bones on why this is bad. Number 1, ownership or lack thereof. When you buy digital games, digital ownership means that you have a license to said thing that you bought. It doesn't actually mean ownership. There's even been California law passed in 2024 to help make this distinction. Governor Newsom signed the law that states, "The law bans digital storefronts from using terms like buy or purchase unless they inform customers that they're not getting unrestricted access to whatever they're buying. Storefronts will have to tell their customers they're getting a license that can be revoked, as well as provide a list of all the restrictions that come along with it. Companies that break the rule could be fined for false advertising." But we've known this. The battle between physical and digital ownership has been a losing battle for many years at this point. Many new games these days that you buy, the full game is not on the disc, or in Nintendo's case, it is not on the game keycard that you buy. You have to download the game off of the internet after inserting the disc or the game keycard. Also, a lot of games these days have game updates or DLCs that you obviously can't access without downloading them off of the internet. So the disc or the physical game that you get doesn't contain the full game in that way. Despite this, having physical media was the final barricade in this battle. If the company has full control over digital content and licenses, that means that they can revoke them at any time for any reason, really. And there's a lot of people who think this will never happen to my games because that just doesn't happen. But Sony has just proved that they will do something like this. They just removed over 550 movies from people's accounts because of a licensing deal. In the statement, they simply said, from September 1st, 2026, due to our content licensing agreements, you will no longer be able to access your previously purchased content from Studio Canal, and it will be removed from your video library. No mention of refunds or compensation or anything like that. They're just gone if you bought them. On top of that, you need a PSN account to access your digital games. So what happens when your account gets hacked, lost, or banned? There's a story on PC Mag about how this guy who decided to go all digital lost $20,000 worth of PlayStation games because of this hacker who decided to hack into his account, and he basically was fed up with the retaliation that eventually the account just got banned. And this was after bypassing a number of very flimsy security measures. Plus, people are resurfacing this particular clause in Sony's terms of use because it is a little concerning just how games are very much tied to your account. Sony reserves the right to close inactive PlayStation Network accounts after 36 months and permanently delete all digital game purchases. If the system registers 3 years of inactivity, Sony can initiate the process. The company will contact the owner by email. From this point, a 6-month period begins. If no login occurs within this time or no explicit request is made to retain the account, it will be deleted. Recovery is then impossible. So my point is, with having physical copies, they don't fully fix the issue of like ownership of having a full game. You still have to access the internet to download your game and access the full content, but at least with physical copies, you tangibly own the copy. You can play the game, you can pass it around, you can lend it to other people, you can have it in your shelf and have it forever. Number 2, digital monopoly. So with physical being gone, that means that there are no other store options except for the PlayStation Store to buy games from in the future, which means you're subject to one price from one store, which is a monopoly. And with no other competition in the marketplace, Sony doesn't have incentive to run discounts or sales as much. If you look at many PlayStation titles actually and just go through their pricing history, you can see that digital copies don't go on sale as often as their physical counterparts. And what makes this even scarier is that Sony has already been practicing dynamic pricing. There has been multiple reports of people seeing this, and with game prices increasing year after year, I wouldn't put it past Sony to be comfortable using dynamic prices more in the future, especially in a digital world. And this leads us to a potentially very bleak future of gaming becoming much more subscription-based, which is a fear that I think a lot of people share, where you're paying monthly to access your games because of the lack of true ownership. We've seen the same thing happen to software like Adobe, where they no longer have copies that you can just own and you have to opt into their monthly payment. And again, I think that if Sony is willing to do something as anti-consumer as axing all physical discs, I wouldn't put it past them to inch closer to a scary model like this. A very scary and greedy model like this. As a side note, I know a popular argument against people who advocate for physical games are saying things like, well, what about Steam? Don't you download digital games for your PC? Full transparency, I buy both digital and physical games, okay? And I admit that a lot of people have moved over from buying physical to digital. My rule is basically I buy digital when it's cheap during things like Steam summer sales or seasonal sales. I download digital games when I get codes for them, when I get offers from publishers. But besides that, if I am buying things for console, I mainly buy them physically. I think when it comes to PC, it's two things. It's options and trust. With PC, you have multiple storefronts that you can choose to buy games from. You have a lot of pricing variety to choose where to buy your games. One company also can't just like remove the entire store like PlayStation did with the PS3. Like, even if Steam decided to remove a bunch of games, you could also just buy those games off of other storefronts. There are also sites like GOG available on PC. to buy games from that are committed to hosting DRM-free games. To further explain what DRM is, as I think a lot of people have seen this term being thrown around, DRM stands for Digital Rights Management. It's a type of technology implemented by game companies to regulate and control the manner in which you utilize the games you purchase. Think of it as a sophisticated lock that prevents individuals from playing the games they have legally acquired in methods that the company deems undesirable or unauthorized. Essentially, when you buy a game that incorporates DRM, you're not merely obtaining the game itself. You're also acquiring a comprehensive set of rules and restrictions concerning how, when, and where you are permitted to play it. The reason you should care about DRM is that it can significantly interfere with how you enjoy your games. In some cases, even though you paid for the game, you're at the mercy of the DRM system to determine if, when, and how you play. DRM can create barriers for you, a legitimate user, which feels unfair, especially when you just want to relax and play a game without unnecessary restrictions or interruptions. GOG has this handy graphic that kind of shows you the things that are possible without the DRM restrictions. So you can play offline, you are in control of auto updates that won't mess with like things like mods. You have full control of your game files on top of all these other things. With a PlayStation console, you are locked into a PlayStation ecosystem. That means stricter DRM because it's a closed platform. You have no other store alternatives. You have to buy from the PlayStation Store, which means no other pricing alternatives. And on the point of trust, I think Sony has broken a lot of it with showing that they're willing to just remove your content even if you paid for it, and change the pricing in any way they want. Again, buying physical solves a lot of these issues. You can buy secondhand from different retailers and you can keep your games permanently. Number 3, media preservation. This one's an obvious one. So the PS3 and Vita stores shut down. You can't buy or access those games anymore through the digital storefront, but they exist in physical form as the fallback. You can buy PS3 and Vita games and still play them in that way. The same thing happened with the 3DS store. Nintendo just took down the entire store and that was it. And the only fallback for those games besides modding was buying the physical versions of the game. The PlayStation 6 isn't going to have this fallback. In 2 to 3 generations after it, Sony will probably take down that digital storefront too. The generation of people after are going to struggle so much more with media preservation and accessibility to these games after that happens. I think of an example of like PT, how that demo never got a physical release and the only people that had PT are the people who downloaded it on their PlayStation and kept it forever. That's pretty much the only way you can play it. And it sucks because that demo is like legendary. It is still talked about a lot today and I would have loved to play it, but I don't know how. And then finally, let's talk about accessibility and cost. And I think this section highlights just how disgustingly anti-consumer this decision is. People who follow my content already know I mention the library a lot because you can rent games from the library, and there's a lot of people who still don't know about this free resource. I have an ongoing series on my short form platforms where I visit libraries to rent video games from. I like exploring the libraries in Los Angeles to see if they have video game rentals. And I think this is such an incredible free resource to have. I remember going to the Inglewood library and seeing just how many PlayStation games there were on the shelves and how many were checked out. A lot of the popular ones were always on hold or were checked out. And because people are becoming more aware of video games being in libraries, they're just now starting to become more of a normal thing in at least the more metropolitan cities. It's not just taking away this resource from low-income families that obviously benefit from this, but with how expensive gaming is now, there's so many people who benefit from this. The average middle-class family can benefit from this. The college student who wants to spend a little bit of time gaming instead of studying can benefit from the library. I say that this resource is becoming more and more important now, especially because gaming has become more expensive, that it is truly a resource that anyone can benefit from. And then let's talk about the countries that don't even have access to the PlayStation Network. If you don't have access to that, there are a lot of games that just become unavailable to you. There's been a headline going around of how Marvel Tokon is blocked in over 130 countries, and it's just due to PSN requirements. Why Marvel Tokon has been blocked in these areas has not been explicitly stated, but fans think they've figured out the cause. It just so happens that the PlayStation Network is unavailable to access in any of the countries on the list. Also, there's plenty of countries that don't have access to high-speed internet or internet internet is very expensive for them. For countries like these, the physical games market was essential to enjoy the hobby, and that was slowly being stripped away from them because of the whole having to access the internet to download your games. But I think taking away the physical games market is the final blow in taking this away from countries with poor internet access. And then let's talk about the secondhand market. So obviously the physical games market keeps game prices down and budget friendly because one, there's competition. There are retailers like Amazon and Best Buy competing for your money to spend on games. A lot of shops also want to get rid of their physical inventory, and that's why they do sales. And then obviously selling secondhand makes games cheaper because it is a used product. And there's already been people saying how this announcement has hiked the prices of physical games up. I saw this video from an avid retro games collector saying how the prices shot up overnight because of the announcement. So not only is this decision simultaneously destroying small businesses like the used game shop stores, they are also making the inventory more expensive. And the real kicker in all of this is that the cost reduction isn't even passed on to the consumer. Selling games digitally makes game companies more money than selling games in boxes, where publishers take about 50% of the sale price. Sony takes a 30% cut of game sales on the PlayStation Store, leaving 70% for publishers. When PlayStation goes 100% digital from 2028 onwards, the game companies, including Sony, will make more money overall from software sales. Meanwhile, ditching a disc drive would, in theory, make the PS6 cheaper to produce amid the ongoing RAM-pocalypse fueled by the AI boom. However, with the PS6 threatening to be a $1,000 plus console as AI data centers trigger global memory shortages that send SSD and RAM prices skyrocketing, expensive games pile onto an already growingly unaffordable hobby. Digital distribution could have passed those savings down to the consumer. Instead, with GTA 6's so-called physical edition serving as a $80 to $100 code in a box, publishers have made it clear that isn't going to happen. So even though Sony makes more from digital sales and they save money from having no disk drive on the PS6, consumers will pay more than they've ever had for a PlayStation console with the PS6, more for digital games as the prices keep going up. And on top of that, we're going to be probably paying for a disk drive add-on. Analysts suggest that at a minimum, the standard version of the PSX won't have a physical media disk drive because Sony will be looking for ways to reduce the cost of its next-gen hardware, and this is an easy win. It's possible that an add-on disk drive could be made available to play older PS4 and PS5 games on disk. In other words, we are paying more for lesser benefits. And then just from a cultural perspective, I think about how I was introduced to my first couple games. I think about games being Christmas gifts and things that you unwrap and open. I've shared the story before of how Kingdom Hearts, I just happened to stumble upon that franchise and it became one of my favorite games of all time. Basically, I was in grade school. I was like in the 4th or 5th grade, and we had this like year-end auction where all the students in the class would bring something to auction off, and you would use the points that you saved up over the year for being a good student on the things that were being auctioned. And I just happened to pick up Kingdom Hearts with my points because nobody else wanted it. And I was like, I mean, this looks like a cute game. And that was like a pivotal moment in shaping who I am as a gamer today. I think about sharing games among siblings, cousins, just being able to lend and share games so easily with a physical copy. I think the whole reason why I go out of my way to buy physical today, even before this announcement, is because a lot of the games I grew up with, I don't own them anymore. I'm the little sibling who lost all my consoles and games to the older sibling, so those games aren't in my possession anymore. Most of the retro games that I have are handheld games and consoles because I actually had my own version of the handheld. But a lot of TV consoles, they were given to the older sibling. So I don't have a lot of access to those games anymore. And that is a big regret of mine, not being able to have my own copies of those games. And I personally just get a lot of joy being able to share my favorite games with my friends. I also grew up in a neighborhood where my neighbors would share games with me. So I would have never played Tales of Symphonia, my favorite JRPG of all time, unless my neighbor from across the street shared a physical copy with me. And to think that all of these authentic experiences and serendipitous moments with gaming might all just be gone in a couple generations from now. Which leads me to my next point. This is probably the future business model standard. There's already a lot of reports and rumors that the next Xbox generation won't have a disk drive as well, and they're probably going all digital. And then people are really holding out for Nintendo to be the last console to keep these game key cards and not completely ditch physical games. But companies follow trends, and it's scary to think that all the major companies will no longer support physical games in the future. Okay, now that we got all of that out of the way, the next natural question is, what can we do in this situation? Well, I know there's a lot of things like petitions going around. I know there's like a change.org petition that has over like 110,000 signatures at this point. But as IGN candidly puts it here, will petitions like this and all the online backlash have any impact at all? It seems unlikely. Sony's share price enjoyed a bump following the announcement, which suggests the market is in favor of it. Unsurprising given it will in theory make the company more money. So if money is the only thing they care about, I'm going to let my money speak. Even if I wanted a PS6, I actually just don't see the point of getting it at all. I think the whole reason why I got a PS5 is because it's cheaper than getting a high-end PC to play my games, and it could play physical discs. Similar to the Steam machine, I think people were enticed by the idea of the Steam machine at the beginning before revealing its price because it would have made sense to get it if it were a cheaper alternative to getting a PC. If the PS6 ends up being over $1,000, I'm just going to invest that money into upgrading my PC. And after the last State of Play, I said this previously, but I'm not even impressed with Sony's exclusives these days that I will easily pass on them if it means saving all that money. I don't care for God of War. I don't care for Wolverine. The only exclusive at this point that I care about is Astrobot, and it's a real shame because I think Astrobot is a phenomenal game, but I don't think we're gonna get an Astrobot game for many years anyway, so I already don't buy PS Plus, so that it's an easy one. And then I'm going to buy physical where I can. I'm going to get the most out of my consoles, not just the PS5, but all my consoles, because again, like I said, I'm afraid that this is going to be a start of a trend, and now it's just more important than ever for me to buy physical. Beyond that, I think it's important to keep in mind the things that led us here. And in America, that means voting for a profit and business first administration that disregards consumer rights, enacting things like tariffs, zero regulations on data centers and investment into AI that have raised the prices across everything in technology, and lack of legislation that protects against anti-consumer practices and better defines digital ownership. So if there's anything that you can take away from this video, I hope it can make clear that nothing exists in a vacuum. I think it's one thing to come from a place of ignorance, not quite understanding how big this decision is and how it affects the future. But if you choose to understand the facts and still say that you don't really care and it doesn't affect you, so it doesn't matter, just say you come from a place of privilege at that point. Whether you only buy digital or you only buy physical or you buy both, it's important to at least have the choice.